When I was little, my father was famous. He was the greatest samurai in the empire. He cut off the heads of 131 lords. He was the greatest samurai in the empire. And he took me with him.
Hey everybody. Okay, here's what happened. I was bored last night and browsing YouTube comments, and I noticed a notification that YouTube had sent me. Now, I don't know if the YouTube algorithm is just trying to stir the pot, trying to get me back in the mix or what, but they recommended the latest video from Denier talking about the moon landing. And like I said, I was bored, so I watched it, and I'll be damned. That boy hasn't learned a damn thing over the last few years. His video is called Why Apollo 11's Earthrise Picture is a Huge Red Flag, and it has so many examples of flawed thinking that I don't think I can cover them all. But let's see what he brings this time. He starts off saying he wants to build his case in components, which sounds great. He's going to lay out the different elements to show how they come together and prove his point. Now, the components themselves have to be valid in order to build a valid case, so here's hoping he does it well. The first thing he talks about is the moon and how he thinks it's kind of odd that he can zoom in with his P900 and get so much detail.
I was able to get in and capture this much detail looking at the moon where it's supposed to be 238,000 miles away. I find that to be a little odd.
Now, I'd like to first point out that the level of detail he's getting is relative. The craters that are so clearly seen are hundreds of miles wide. We're not reading license plates on the surface of the moon here. Now, he then talks about how in a previous video he tried to look at a couple of trees a couple miles down the road, but there was so much atmospheric distortion the trees weren't clear. Yet, he was able to tilt the camera up and see the moon with better detail than the trees.
The tree line was only like 2 miles, 2.5 miles away. I zoom in on it, and there was so much atmospheric distortion to a point to where I couldn't get as much detail. The moon just happened to be in the sky at the same time, so I tilt the camera upward and zoom in on the moon, and I could get better detail on the moon.
Again, he says he found that odd. Even though mere seconds prior he mentions that looking down the road, he had atmospheric distortion. He still found it odd that looking upwards in a direction without the atmospheric distortion was different. When I point out that globe deniers and moon landing deniers show an inability to think, this is what I mean. Now, I have no issue with initially thinking that it was odd, but in thinking it was odd, you should then be spurred to think about it for a bit. And if you thought about it for a little bit, you would say, okay, we have denser atmosphere at the lower levels, and my entire view was at that lower, denser atmospheric level. The whole 2 miles or so is through this distortion level with more particulate and vapor and things causing distortion, the entire length of my view. But if I look up, then maybe the small local area of 100 feet or so has that distorted atmosphere in it. But after that, it's clear skies and then space. Of course it's going to be different. Now, seeing the moon through his P900 is the first thing he brought up, and I'm genuinely wondering what that has to do with the Earthrise on the moon, because I have no idea why he brought that up. So next he moves on to why we only see one side of the moon. He describes tidal locking in a fairly condescending tone.
The answer is tidal locking, according to the globe model. The globe model is all about physics. You know, you got to understand physics if you want to understand the globe model, or how to debunk the globe model, for sure. At least that's what they tell you.
And hey, I know a condescending tone when I hear it because, come on, I'm the king of condescending tone. He derides tidal locking as one of those convenient coincidences, like the moon and sun size and an eclipse.
The sun is 400 times larger than the Earth. The moon is 4 times smaller than the Earth, so it just happens to work out that way. It's another one of those strange coincidences, much like this whole the moon is tidally locked to Earth.
Now, let me point out something here. When I did a video a few years back on these poor scientific understanding, I called out a size value he seemed to pull out of nowhere.
The sun is 400 times larger than the Earth.
Daryl, who's telling you the sun is 400 times the size of the Earth? Did you bother to look that up? Where did you get that number? Because you see, the sun is not 400 times the size of the Earth. There is no dimension that comes to 400 times. Not diameter, not circumference, not volume. And people said, hey, Jerry, the man just got things mixed up. Don't razz him for that. And even I thought, yeah, maybe I'm being a bit nitpicky about this one. But here we are, almost 3 years later, and he says the same false value again. It's not about the sun being 400 times the size of the Earth. It's that the sun is about 400 times the size of the moon. 401, actually. And since the sun is about 400 times farther away from the Earth than the moon is, they look about the same size. Now, you deride these convenient coincidences, but do you notice how much I use the word about? The sun is actually more like 389 times farther away than the moon, but we round it up and say about 400. But that aside, why haven't you learned that simple fact yet? It's been years, and yet you haven't cared enough about the facts to update your information. Man. Okay, he then mentions all this perfection is a huge coincidence.
So it's perfect motion, perfect distance, perfect speed. Huge coincidence, in my opinion.
And again, this shows his cursory understanding of the physics.
You got to understand physics if you want to understand the globe model or how to debunk the globe.
And yeah, I'm going to get nitpicky about this because the moon's motion, its distance and its speed are not perfect. The moon moves nearer and farther from the Earth throughout the month, and it speeds up and slows down. And on top of that, it's tilted a bit on its axis and wobbles a little, precesses. And so why we say the moon shows us the same face all the time, that's a generalized statement. We actually see more than half of the moon over its entire cycle. But that requires a deeper understanding of the science than Marble is willing or able to absorb. So he sticks with the big print understanding of same size all the time, everything perfect, massive coincidence, middle school understanding of it all. Oh, wait.
Tidal locking. So that's the first component.
Marble just said that this was his first component, the tidal locking. So what was all that zooming in and seeing detail on the moon about? Man, just wasting our time. All right, now he starts talking about Apollo 11 and makes the same tired comment about the post-mission press conference that they all do.
Where they're sitting there talking about how they couldn't see any stars, where they're all looking a little dejected, looking kind of depressed.
You know, I think people like Marble think that this press conference was like a post-game press conference, like right after they landed, and they should be all like pumped up to talk about this awesome thing they just did, when in fact it was nearly 2 months later. 2 months. And I wonder how many times they had talked about or written reports about what happened during this mission over those 2 months. Now, as it happens, they were cracking jokes during the press conference and everything, but do people expect them to get like hyped up every time they have to tell a story about it? These guys who were not selected for their public speaking skills? Anyway, I digress. Next, he goes on to an article from space.com and says this.
We can take pictures. That we now have the technology on Earth to zoom in and show the lunar sites, and we have them mapped out.
Now, this is just a bit of curiosity on my part. Does he think that this image of the lunar site was taken from Earth? That's really what it sounded like. But I have to point out that this was not taken from Earth. We don't have that technology. It was taken by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which is in orbit of the moon. It says it right there in the article, which I assume he did not read. But he uses that article to lead us into having locations of the different landing sites pegged on an image of the moon, and Apollo 11's location there. He brings his components together now to talk about the Earthrise, and he asks a question.
If we only see one side of the moon, because it's tidally locked to the Earth, and the Apollo 11 pictures are from the location specified by NASA on the front, on the side, facing towards the Earth, then why do the pictures from the Apollo 11 mission show Earth so low on the horizon?
And given the way he set up his premise, it's a good question. He goes into what angles things should be seen from if the photos were taken from the Apollo 11 landing site. And in trying to play devil's advocate, I guess, he starts going into the lunar lander's construction quality for some reason. And then he decides to go and rehash this claim that images of the Earth are somehow cropped and pasted into Apollo photos, and that by messing with the levels can reveal the evidence of that. But all that shows is that he doesn't understand how image compression works and causes these type of artifacts to show up all the time. I have a whole video debunking this claim. I did it years ago, and there are many others online doing the same type of demonstrations. Now, all this leads to his conclusion that the pictures of the Earth are fabricated. The view of the Earth could not be so low on the horizon from the Apollo landing site because that location is facing the Earth. So the image must be faked, and you can see the evidence of fakery in the pictures. But here's the problem with Daryl's claim. Now, listen up, Daryl. I don't want to have to repeat this too many times. Let's go back to where you put all your components together and ask a question.
If we only see one side of the moon because it's tidally locked to the Earth, and the Apollo 11 pictures are from the location specified by NASA on the front, on the side, facing towards the Earth, then why do the pictures from the Apollo 11 mission show Earth so low on the horizon?
Here's the answer. This photo was not taken from the Apollo 11 landing site. This photo was taken while in lunar orbit. What? You see, just because a photo was taken during the Apollo 11 mission, it doesn't mean the photo was taken from the landing site. Now, since Daryl downloaded this image straight from the website, he must have noticed the name of the photo, if he read it. And it's the same, that name is the same type of catalog number that all Apollo photos have. So if you looked up that image on the Apollo image archives, you can see nice descriptions of these photos. And in this case, how they were taken from the command module while it and the LEM were still in orbit around the moon prior to the actual landing. This is another example of a denier being blinded by their worldview and not bothering to do the minimum amount of research about the topic. And I mean the minimum. The webpage where he first found this image reads, the first sentence, "This view of Earth rising over the moon's horizon was taken from the Apollo 11 spacecraft." From the spacecraft, not the landing site, not the surface of the moon, the spacecraft. That was hint number one to the answer to his question. Now, the next sentence says the terrain nearby is Smythe's Sea. Might be pronounced Smiths, but I'll call it Smythe's, which, by the way, is way over here. That's hint number two. The very next sentence even has the lunar coordinates of the terrain in the center of the photo, which again is way over here. All the answers to your question about the photo were right on the page where you saw the photo, man. You didn't even try to learn the facts of the matter. And it's the same with all of you deniers, moon landing or globe. You don't want to learn the facts, so you don't bother with any research that doesn't point you toward your end goal. Even now, even right now, I'm certain someone is going to tell you about this video and how I pointed out how you failed to do the minimum amount of research and failed basic reading comprehension. And so you're spouting claims that are easily disproven, embarrassing, unforced errors, and you're going to say, man, I don't care. And that will be the truest thing you've said on this topic. Because when it comes to arguing the science, doing the research, getting your facts right, you just don't care.
That's my job! That's what I do! I don't lose! I win! I win! You there no one on this planet to even challenge me?
Maybe you came by to congratulate me on last night's victory.